There's a liquid sitting on a shelf at your local auto parts store right now. It costs $3. It has been sitting on that same shelf since 1952. And in over 70 years, not a single mechanic, not a single dealership service advisor, not a single automotive manufacturer has ever told you it exists. What it does is simple. It permanently lowers your engine's operating temperature by 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Not by adding a bigger radiator, not by replacing the thermostat, not by any mechanical modification whatsoever. One bottle, one heat cycle, and the physics of how heat moves inside your engine changes forever. You have probably never heard of nucleate boiling. Most people haven't. But right now, as your engine runs, it is happening inside your cylinder head, and it is quietly doing damage that your temperature gauge will never warn you about. That gauge only tells you when the disaster has already arrived. It tells you nothing about what is building right now, at the combustion chamber ceiling, at the exhaust valve seats, at the cylinder wall just below the top ring. The real story of overheating starts long before that needle moves, and the solution to it has been available for $3 since before most of your parents were born. To understand why this matters, you need to go back to 1943, not to a garage, not to a racetrack, to a research laboratory in Cleveland, Ohio. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the agency that would eventually become NASA, was trying to solve one of the most critical engineering problems of the Second World War. The liquid-cooled aircraft engines powering Allied fighters, the Allison V-1710 in the P-38 Lightning, the Rolls-Royce Merlin in the Spitfire, and the Mustang, were failing under combat conditions. Not from enemy fire, from heat. Specifically, from a phenomenon where the coolant flowing through the cylinder head passages could not remove heat fast enough at the hottest points on the metal surface. At those points, the coolant would locally boil, forming steam bubbles that clung to the cylinder wall, and those bubbles were the hidden enemy. Here is why that matters so deeply. Steam conducts heat approximately 40 times less efficiently than liquid water. When a steam bubble forms on a hot metal surface and clings there, it is not just a bubble, it is a tiny thermal blanket insulating that spot of metal from the coolant flowing right past it. The metal underneath gets hotter. More bubbles form. The insulation thickens. The metal gets hotter still. This is the cycle that warps cylinder heads, blows head gaskets, and cracks engine blocks. It does not announce itself with a warning light. It builds silently, one microscopic bubble at a time, until the damage is done and the repair bill arrives. A NACA researcher named Dr. Harold Bivens cracked this problem in 1943. What he discovered was elegant in the way that the best engineering solutions always are. The reason those steam bubbles cling to the metal surface is water's surface tension. Water, by nature, has a very high surface tension. When a bubble forms at a nucleation site on a hot metal wall, that surface tension holds the bubble in place, stable, growing, insulating. Bivens found that by adding a wetting agent, a compound that reduces water's surface tension, to the coolant, the bubbles lost their grip. They detached almost immediately after forming, carried away by the flowing coolant before they could grow large enough to matter. The metal surface was continuously swept clean. Heat transfer improved dramatically. Engine temperatures dropped by 20 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. He published his findings in 1945. That document has been publicly available and freely downloadable from NASA's Technical Report Server since 1947. Everything that $3 bottle does, and why it does it, was put into writing before the baby boom began. The post-war racing community found out quickly. Several NACA engineers moved into the emerging American motorsport world in the late 1940s and early 1950s, and they brought this knowledge with them. Redline Chemical Company commercialized the first automotive wetting agent additive for racing in 1952, marketing it under the name Water Wetter. NASCAR teams began using it. Indianapolis 500 teams used it. Formula One teams used it during the aluminum engine era, when thermal management was the single most important performance variable in the sport. The U.S. military eventually specified wetting agent additives for vehicles deployed in desert conditions, where ambient temperatures above 120 degrees Fahrenheit made nucleate boiling not just a nuisance, but a combat readiness issue. Equipment that overheated in the desert cost lives. The military adopted the solution because the cost of not doing so was measured in ways that could not be put on a repair invoice. And yet, somehow, through all of this, the $3 bottle never made it to the mainstream. It never appeared in a cooling system maintenance recommendation from any automotive manufacturer. It was never featured in a Consumer Reports article. The American Automobile Association's maintenance guidance publications have never mentioned it. The antifreeze industry, which generates roughly $3 billion annually in the United States alone, evaluates its products on freeze protection, boiling point elevation, and corrosion inhibition. The elimination of nucleate boiling is not a metric that appears on any antifreeze label. It never needed to be, because a separate $3 bottle handles it completely, and the antifreeze companies had no particular reason to tell you that. The repair industry had even less reason. Engine overheating is one of the most profitable failure modes in automotive service. A warped cylinder head requires machining or replacement anywhere from $800 to $2,500 just in parts. A blown head gasket means complete engine disassembly, $1,500 to $4,000 depending on the engine. A cracked block means you are talking about a complete engine replacement, $3,000 to $8,000. Every one of those repairs traces back, in some meaningful way, to the thermal events that a wetting agent prevents. The cooling system service industry builds its revenue on two things: preventive maintenance, which is legitimate and necessary, and failure repairs, which are made more likely by the knowledge gap that the industry has never had much incentive to close. The $3 bottle has sat on the bottom shelf of the cooling system aisle for 7 decades. No service advisor has ever pointed to it. Think for a moment about what that actually means. You may have had a car that ran a little warm. Maybe the temperature gauge sat 1 tick higher than it used to. Maybe your mechanic suggested a new thermostat, a radiator flush, perhaps a new radiator altogether. Maybe you spent $500 solving a problem that had a $3 solution that no one mentioned because the $3 solution does not generate service revenue. The gap between what the racing paddock knows and what the average driver knows is not accidental. It is precisely where the money lives. Now here is what this actually looks like in the real world. A truck driver in Phoenix, Arizona, documented his experience in an online forum in 2019. His 2007 Ford F-350 with a 6.4-liter Power Stroke diesel had been running at the upper edge of its normal temperature range through Arizona summers under towing loads. Anyone who knows that engine knows that running hot is not something you want to play around with. After adding a wetting agent additive at the recommended concentration, his normal operating temperature dropped 18 degrees Fahrenheit under the same towing conditions. The peaks that had previously approached his warning threshold now came in 22 degrees below it. Total cost of the treatment was $3.49 per bottle. The head gasket failure he avoided on that engine costs between $4,000 and $6,000 to repair. The math does not require a calculator. An independent engineering study published by the Society of Automotive Engineers evaluated water wetter in a production 2-liter 4-cylinder engine under standardized load conditions. The treated engine showed peak coolant temperature reductions of 22 degrees Fahrenheit compared to the same engine running antifreeze alone. Cylinder head surface temperature at the hottest measured point dropped by 31 degrees Fahrenheit. Same coolant flow rate, same radiator, same ambient conditions. The only variable was the wetting agent. The study is a matter of public record. The data has been available for over 2 decades. The mainstream consumer market has simply never been told about it. What makes this discovery feel almost surreal is the timeline. Bivens published the solution in 1945. Redline Chemical put it in a bottle in 1952. NASCAR has been using it for over 70 years. The U.S. military deployed it in desert combat conditions. British classic car enthusiasts have been recommending it for chronically overheating vintage engines since the 1980s. And all of this time, the bottle has been sitting on the shelf at the auto parts store 2 aisles over from the antifreeze, quietly waiting for someone to pick it up. Racing teams are not sentimental about their equipment. They do not use something for 70 consecutive years because of tradition. They use it because when they measure what happens inside the engine, the data is unambiguous. If you want to use a wetting agent in your own vehicle, the process is straightforward. The primary product available at most auto parts stores is Water Wetter by Redline Chemical, which costs between $8 and $12 for a 12-ounce bottle that treats 1 full cooling system. For maximum benefit, perform a fresh coolant flush if your current coolant is more than 2 years old, because depleted corrosion inhibitors and accumulated contaminants reduce overall cooling efficiency independently of anything the wetting agent does. Then allow the engine to cool completely. Add the wetting agent at the concentration specified on the label, start the engine, and let it reach full operating temperature. Most people notice the temperature gauge settling lower than its previous normal position within 10 to 15 minutes of the engine reaching operating temperature. The wetting agent does not deplete through chemical reaction. It stays active in your coolant until the coolant itself is flushed, typically every 2 years or 30,000 miles. Replace the bottle at each coolant change. Your annual cost for continuous protection is somewhere between $4 and $12. The vehicles that benefit most are the ones running at the upper edge of normal temperature range. Vehicles in hot climates, stop-and-go commuters, trucks and SUVs that tow regularly, performance engines with increased compression ratios that generate more heat, and classic or vintage cars with original cooling systems that were designed for an era of looser tolerances. But the honest answer is that every engine that does not contain a wetting agent contains a cylinder head right now where steam bubbles are forming and clinging and insulating, quietly raising the temperature at the exhaust valve seats and the combustion chamber ceiling in ways your temperature gauge will never register until it is too late. Harold Bivens understood this problem while trying to keep Merlin engines from destroying themselves over the English Channel. He published the solution in 1945. It cost him nothing to share it. The cooling system service industry has been quietly, profitably not sharing it ever since. Some knowledge has a way of surviving anyway, passed through racing paddocks and military maintenance manuals and the garages of engineers who learned to measure what actually matters. Now it has reached you. The temperature gauge in your car is not your friend. It is a last resort alarm. By the time that needle moves, the damage is already accumulating. The protection happens before the needle moves in a $3 bottle on the shelf that has been waiting since 1952 for someone to pick it up and use it. If this is the kind of knowledge you want more of, the things hidden in plain sight, the technical truths buried under decades of commercial silence, then subscribe to Secret Fix Vault and hit the notification bell. This is where the vaults get opened.